Welcome back to preview the game on the final day of the Premier League season between Newcastle United and West Ham. Let's go start with the home side in big trouble at the bottom now following defeat at QPR last time out.
Yeah, I think they still fancy staying up, but obviously they are the team just above the bottom three there. Hull, just in the bottom three, 2 points behind them. But yeah, that last game at QPR they had, the week before that they drew 1-1 at home to West Brom after 8 defeats in a row. Terrible form that they're on. But that game, I think going to QPR, the QPR they were confirmed as relegated. Newcastle, they should have gone there and thought, we should win this game. This is against one of the sides below us in the table, and they took the lead in the first half. Riviere, finally got his first goal for the club. I think it was 1,080 minutes. I think he's gone, playing for Newcastle without scoring. He finally got his goal, and it was a goal that sort of summed up his season, really, wasn't it? He sort of slipped over the ball, he bounced the ball into the ground. It went over the keeper and in, and very fortunate the way it went in, and he sort of celebrated as if he'd, sort of won the World Cup. But obviously it must have been a big relief, sort of the same way that Danny Graham scored that very fortunate goal for Sunderland to sort of, break his drought. But yeah, he obviously put them ahead, and then the second half, they just never really pushed on. They conceded the equaliser to Matty Phillips, and then obviously the winning goal from Leroy Fer was an absolute stunner. But you look at the way they gave away the ball, to let Fer have it. It's just that sort of stuff. That all these mistakes they've made. It's a lot of the times it's just laziness and not really concentrating, and it's those sort of basics that you expect the managers to be able to drill into his players, and that's where you wonder if John Carver has really sort of got the squad playing as he wants them to. There was that incident a couple of weeks back where he suggested that players might be getting sent off because they didn't want to play and sort of have the pressure of the run in, and it's just not a very good situation at Newcastle. And look at where the league table is, so they know if they win here they're definitely staying up, but anything less than that, and it gives they've got a much worse goal difference than Hull. So if they draw this, Hull have got a very tough game at home to Manchester United, but United, there's not too much for them to play for. They're pretty much guaranteed to finish fourth. So Hull might go into that game, and if Newcastle, if the fans checking on their phones, they see that Hull have gone 1-0 up against Manchester United, and it's still 0-0 at St James's Park, it would get very, very nervy there. And if they know they have to win, and I know West Ham aren't in great form, but the way Newcastle are going at the moment, it's hard to see them winning any game, and really tough situation for them. And if they go down, massive club up there, sort of one club city, huge fan base up there, and look at the squad. Some people saying they're too good to go down, but you do wonder about that.
Yeah, you mentioned the fact that a lot of people have said recently. I've seen it quite a lot recently. They're too good to go down, but when you sit and I sat and looked through the squad last night, and you look at each position, and I'm just not sure they're too good to go down. Obviously, they have got some standout players. Let's get it right. Musa Sissoko is obviously a standout player who would look at home. I think he could play top four. I think he's that good. And Jose Perez up front's a decent player. He's got 7 league goals this season. He's highly thought of in Spain. But Cisse obviously had that big suspension. Cisse's got 11 goals in the league. He's quite a good player. But you look defensively, Colaccini, not sure about him. Stephen Taylor's obviously had his problems suspension-wise, etc. Ryan Taylor. Anita's been playing left back at turns. Colback's a decent player, but apart from that, you're thinking Remy Cabela's coming from France. He's okay. Riviera's really struggled. Obertan, players like that. Obviously, they've got Rolando Aarons, who's a young player that really impressed start of the season, then got injured. But you just look through their squad, and is it too good to go down? You're thinking, it's been said recently, obviously Newcastle have had that spell in the Championship. They've been down there and they kept players like Colaccini, etc. But you just wonder if they did go down, which I don't think they will, but if they did, you'd fancy them to come back up, because it is, like you say, it's a massive club, but their squad is not too strong, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done, because they're going to be missing some key players this summer. Sissoko will go, that's for certain.
Yeah, I think it depends depending on who they keep. Will obviously depend on which division they're playing in. But I think one thing for certain, they'll have a new manager next season. There's no way John Carver's going to keep the job, even if they say win here and do stay up. The terrible run they've been on. It's 8 defeats in their last 9. No, sorry, 9 defeats in 10 actually, isn't it? Yeah, terrible run they've been on, and. He talked about that quote. I think I'm the best coach in the league. That's obviously not true. And just that the woeful run they've had. Who are they going to bring in? Constantly linked with Steve McLaren, the Derby manager. But he sort of Derby finished the season. I think they finished the season. I think it was 2 wins in 13 to miss out on the playoffs. They had a really bad end to the season. And Newcastle then since once the Championship season finished, they sort of approached McLaren and said, "Do you want to take charge of the last 3 games of the season?" He said no. He's now come out and said, "I'm looking ahead to next season with Derby. I want to sort of put right what went wrong at the end of the season in the Championship." So they're not going to get him, and who else do they want to go for? Potentially Sam Allardyce, the West Ham manager, who they come up against here. But Allardyce, even though he's got a great record, of keeping teams in the Premier League and that sort of thing, he's not going to bring that much excitement. They do miss Pardew. I think obviously letting him go to Palace, has proved to be a wrong decision. I know Palace came in with a big compensation deal, but he's done great things at Palace, and Carver's just really not cut the mustard there. So he's off, but I don't know who they'll bring in, and certainly if they go down, it'll be a huge blow to the club, because when it happened, under Shearer, a few years back, that was a crushing blow, but they did get back up straight away, but yeah, Newcastle should not be in the Championship. They are a Premier League club, huge club up there, but in real danger.
Are in real danger. I'd say 13 fewer points than they managed last season, and last season was an okay season, wasn't particularly great, and I think 13 fewer is incredible, really. But moving on to West Ham, like I say, not been in great form, only won one of their last 7 in the league, and it's really tailed off. Last time out against West Ham, took the lead. It's a game that they'd have fancied, maybe not fancied winning, but fancied not getting beat, because when you're at home and Stuart Downing getting on the score sheet again, he had a good start to the season. He sort of tailed off a little bit now. I think he's got 6 league goals this season, so it's a decent enough return from a wide player. Or he's played in a diamond, hasn't he, this season? So, but then to lose that game, Leon Osman gets the equaliser for Everton, and then West Ham this season, you've seen it time and time again. Late on, they concede late on. They've done it against Stoke not that long ago, and a few other times. Manchester United this season, they conceded late on, and they just seem to, they always seem to switch off at the back, and there's a problem for Allardyce, and he sort of expects it now. And to lose at home to Everton is really disappointing. Left them 11th in the table, so it's a tough. They're playing Premier League football this season, like I say, but to end the season like that, and then they go to Newcastle, they could put them down. But it's a game that West Ham away from home this season have only won 3 times, so it's difficult to see them winning.
Definitely, I think West Ham, the problem for them has been, on the whole, you said to fans, 11th place, they might have taken that at the start of the season, said, solid mid-table finish, but just where they were around Christmas time, fantastic, around the top 4, 5, 6 places, and they've really tailed off second half of the season. Obviously, there's so many players really playing well. Sacco went on that goal run, and I think it was 7 in 7 he had. See, he struggled a bit with injury as well. Andy Carroll, they've been a bit unlucky with injuries, you have to say. Carroll's been in and out of the team. Sacco struggled with injuries. Valencia, great start to the season, but since he got injured, he isn't looked quite the same since he came back. But there's certainly been a lot of positives for them, but it's the results this second half of the season. They haven't quite, matched them. Like you say, a lot of, disappointing results. That one last week against Everton, final home game of the season. You want to give the fans something, a good send-off on the final home game, and took the lead. Great finish from Downing, like you said, but to concede late on, it was a disappointing. That winner from Lukaku as well, very disappointing the way he sort of got between the defence, and to have a free header from it was only about 4 yards out. That should never happen, and so that was disappointing. But the Allardyce situation, we mentioned that potentially been linked with Newcastle, but I think he said that he wants to stay as West Ham manager. I think there's the thing with West Ham. There's always this constant talk about we want the side to be playing really good football, but if you've got a manager like Allardyce, he's going to get you a sort of around mid-table finish most seasons, and they were playing some exciting football at the start of the season. So I think it hasn't worked out the second half of the season, but you have to sort of say, right, that we were doing really well at the first half of the season. How can we get back to that? They'll look at that over the summer. They've got a lot of great players, and I think they should be able to keep the bulk of their squad. I think Cresswell's an interesting one. He signed, I think it was $4 million, and a lot of people saying, I've seen some people say he's the best left back in the league. He won all the awards at the West Ham, end of season dinner, and they signed him for $4 million from Ipswich. If there was offers for him this summer, I've seen some of the big clubs link with him. They could probably sell him for over $10 million, which shows he was a really good signing for them. But they'll certainly want to keep him because he's been one of their best players this season.
Yeah, it's been for certain. Like mentioned, overall it's been disappointing second half season. They've got 7 more points they managed last season, so they win this. Obviously that's 10, and that is progress when you look at the facts of it. It's probably the biggest game of the weekend, isn't it? In the Premier League, when you talk about what is it actually at stake, it's a tough one. Can you see West Ham causing Newcastle some problems in this one?
It's such a hard game to call because West Ham been in really bang average form. Newcastle in much worse form. Obviously Newcastle been the worst team in the league for sort of the last 2 months or so. But Newcastle so much more to play for. All the players have said let's get the fans on side. We want a great atmosphere there and just cheer the boys to victory. But I think it's all going to depend on sort of say if Newcastle get an early goal, it'll be huge for them. But if they don't, and say Hull get an early goal against Man United, the fans, technologies these days, they find out instantly on their phones. So there'll certainly be murmurings. But say if United go 2-0 up against Hull and they go in front, then Newcastle fans will be lifted by that, and they might not even need to win. But I think Newcastle, just because they've got so much more to play for, I think they will just edge this. Finally get their first win in whatever it is, 3 months or so. So I'm going to get back then to win 2-0.
2-0. To be honest, I'm actually going to go draw in this one. Newcastle been in such bad form that obviously they drew against West Brom at home a couple of weeks ago, but I just can't see them picking up a win from anywhere. But like I say, the way it is at the bottom of the table, I think they'll stay up because I think Hull, Manchester United will be a draw as well. So I think Newcastle will stay up by the skin of their teeth, and poor season, but to survive on the final weekend is obviously their task for this one. So we can both see Newcastle staying up on the final weekend. We've got 1 win for Newcastle and a 1-1 draw. Thanks for joining us.